Hello again, everybody, for this edition of the Psychology of Wellbeing. Welcome. Again, it's a series that's based on oftentimes the things we don't address. We know food, we know nutrition, we know fitness, but most of the time there's something inside of us that needs work for us to feel radically well, and that's what this series is about. And I want to introduce you to my sponsor, CoSpace, KHOSpace.com. They are a new practitioner area that you can rent by the hour. So for somebody who's in counseling, or if you're a massage therapist, have some type of clinical license, and maybe you don't have a full practice, you still have a beautiful space that you can rent and come in for like an hour. You can rent, even if you have one client a week or 10 clients a week, they're just a really great option. Right now they're in South Florida, but they have huge plans to expand. So check them out, CoSpace.com. And I'm very excited for today's episode. As I met this gentleman here at my very first kickoff of a keynote speech that I had been working on called Radical Wellbeing, Thriving in Chaos. And one of the components of well-being that I covered extensively was letting go of the past. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. So I want to introduce you to Clive Digby-Jones. Even the name is fun, right? Clive Digby-Jones. And he is with Ravenscroft International, and I met him and his lovely wife Eileen. They gave me a copy of the book that they had published, The Missing Piece. And Clive, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we're going to jump into letting go.
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, so I wear three hats. I wear a business hat, and I'm director of something called Power for Good, and I was a coach and board member of several companies helping people invent new futures. I studied Walt Disney for the Disney Corporation, so I have a lot of experience in inventing the future. But the other part is healing, and Ravenscroft International is part of a psychotherapy healing business. But Dr. Eileen Watkins-Seymour, Dr. E, we're partners in life, and I've had free therapy for 28 years. What can I tell you?
Right, that's nice.
And one of the things that I discovered was how to put myself back together. So you're talking about the past and what we hold inside us. So I'm going to talk about that. And I've written a story called Putting Humpty Dumpty Together Again. It's my story.
Yes.
The third thing is I'm the lead membership ambassador for the Holistic Chamber of Commerce, of which you're a member. This is a fantastic organization, but enough of that.
Yes.
So what I want to talk about is letting go, but actually what I want to talk about is becoming. Because we have to understand how our energy, we are energy, science tells us that, and our energy can become fragmented. And I'll talk more about that. But the important thing is to understand that parts of us, parts of our energy at different ages can withdraw. And if what is happening in the world is not kind to us, it can implode. And then it can become frozen. So we have places in our body where energy, memory, thought, feelings, negative feelings are held. What do they do to let us know they're there? They create symptoms. So it might be a physical symptom. It might be an emotional one. We may have anxiety or depression. It may be simply that we get pissed off with our boss who keeps on putting us down. And as much as we try and let go of the feelings associated with that, they hang around. And that means that we are more cautious. We are less than we can fully be. So what I hope we can talk about is, how do we do this? How do we put ourselves away in safekeeping? How do we find ourselves? And how do we get back out so that we can fully be the person we were meant to be with all of our energy and become a power for good in the world?
Yes. And I remember specifically when I was in the heroic public speaking program, and I knew that I wanted to do a presentation on wellness, and I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be. And I naturally gravitated again towards nutrition, fitness. These are the things you need to do well. But from personal experience, and I have some stories I want to share to bring light to the importance of this. I knew that there were things from my past that had the potential to create almost like blocks. Like I had a vision of me heading down a path, elevating, moving upward, but that there were stumbling blocks in the way, and they had names and faces from situations that had happened in my past. And it almost felt as if, like if I'm a vessel, that these things were taking up space. Yes. And that if I could somehow relinquish them or make peace with them, and I'll let you talk about what that means exactly, that my vessel would become more open for positive things, positive energy moving forward. What are your thoughts on that for like the average person on, if you're, when we're talking about, letting go, like we can tell people all day long, you need to let go of the past, you need to let go. How do we actually do that? Or how can you bring it into a framework that people understand?
Well, there are lots of fantastic ways that you can explore your inner world, and then ways that you can manage the symptoms that you find until you can lessen them. And if you're lucky, they go away. I'm going to be talking about a more direct approach, direct to the cause of the symptoms we have. Mm-hmm. So, I did this work myself. I 4 marriages. Later, I realized that there was something adrift when it came to relationships.
Maybe. Actually, their problems.
But actually, I discovered that it started when I was 18 months old. I had a near-death experience. I didn't find that out till I was 50. I didn't understand the ramifications or why I kind of knew things. I was sort of psychic and things like that. I didn't understand where that came from. But that sounds, like heavy duty. For the ordinary person, all of us basically, we want to find out, first of all, where those places are in us. Waking up to the fact that you are not all you could be is the first step. It's self-awareness. We can actually go through life fairly unconscious, just dealing with life, living, survival, and not realize that there's anything for us to find. It's just the way things are. This is a suck it up society.
Right. Tough it out.
Yeah, tough it out. And particularly for guys, we're less used to talking about ourselves, our feelings, or anything else. So we've got a sort of fairly pain-free way of exploring. I say fairly because we've got to release some energy. We've got to release some hurt. We've got to release things. So, but looking around, meditation, all sorts of exercises, books, programs, things, workshops you can go on to find out why you don't feel all you can be, why you seem to have blocks in your vessel.
Yes. And there's almost, like when I started to do some of this work myself, or at least assess, like I took some time to assess, and what I saw was almost like small, medium, and large. So the small things were, somebody said something last week that kind of got on my nerves, and maybe I'm still kind of chewing on that. That's easy. Those are easier. You can relinquish, let those go. You know what? That's not important. Their opinion is not important. Medium might be a boss I had in my past who, was demeaning or liked to embarrass me in front of other people. And so that's something that maybe stuck deeper, went a little longer, maybe eroded some of my confidence. And then there's the bigger one. So if we were, victims of sexual abuse or childhood traumas or a victim of some sort, those feel like bigger boulders.
Yes.
In your opinion, do you start with the small stuff and kind of work up to the bigger stuff? Or how do people get equipped to say, once and for all, I have moved through the fact that I was traumatized as a child in this way and have made peace with it. because I think a lot of people get stuck on that. They get stuck on that. I was a victim, and a lot of people were. I mean, when you're a child, you're at the hands of adults. And if you were victimized in some way, it's very unfair and unfortunate. It becomes part of who you are. How do you work on that?
I'm going to talk about the negative dependency syndrome, something we named, which is why do people hold on to deep negativity?
Yes.
But I want to first of all say there really, to me, are three phases in personal development. One is the self-awareness phase, working out why things are the way they are, when they happen, who did what to whom, and that's great knowledge because it brings power. So the first step is digging into it and trying to work out. The next one is managing yourself, is finding a way of improving on it. There are all sorts of techniques where you can remove symptoms so that you're not triggered by those small or medium ones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say for the large ones, you really need a facilitator to help you dig in. In our book, we have 20 exercises that people can do for themselves to find out about their energy, to explore, and it tells you how we work with people and lots of case studies. So, you'll hear more about the missing piece. But why don't people find it easy to get rid of those things is because they get a payoff.
Right.
So the negative dependency syndrome says, I hold on to fear. And then when the person digs into it, they find out that bottom line was, in order to stay safe, by holding on to that fear, it means I don't go places, I don't interact with people, I don't put myself at risk. Mm-hmm. So I hold on to some fear. It's totally illogical. It's the illogical thinking of the right brain as opposed to the left logical thinking. But, we've had people with problems with alcohol, and they find something like, I hold on to drinking and the shame because when I come to after a binge, I actually feel thankful for being alive. And that's my only time in life that I feel thankful for being alive. So I hold on to the pattern. It's an unconscious equation, we call it.
Yeah, I think when I started to bring into my consciousness this sense of emptying my vessel so that I could be, fill myself more positively, I actually made a list. But, that's the way I am. I'm very, I'm a type A list maker. Let me make a list of my problems and what I need to work through. But it's, for me, it worked that way. I could say, I could call, like I knew almost unconsciously what things I was still holding on to. There were ex-boyfriends, there were bosses, there were parents, there were siblings, friendships. And I literally made a list, and it was almost overwhelming because I was like, if I have not worked through all of these things, I'm really, really cluttered on the inside,
Yes.
And so how do I begin that process of making peace with a lot of these things? And there are some people, I won't state who it is exactly in this conversation because I don't have their permission, but there's somebody that's close to me in my life, and we would get together maybe once a year, and conversations of the past would come up, and literally it was right underneath the skin, and all we had to do was just scratch it a little bit, and it was almost as if they were back 30 years ago, and angry and resentful, and it was like it still existed for them in the present, and I didn't feel that way. And it's just interesting on this process of doing that, and I think your advice is valuable.
Well, I want to talk about how we work a little bit with something like that. So in a workshop, a guy had 18 years worth of eczema, because I saw you almost scratching your skin.
Mm-hmm.
And he drew something called an energy map. Behind me are drawings actually of one person going through the work with us, clearing their energy system, showing where they were holding things in their body.
Mm-hmm.
And he drew his energy map, and around the outside of his skin line, he drew red.
Oh, I see that one. So it's like dark on the inside and red on the exterior.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we asked him to say hello to the red. So, this is going to sound a bit weird, but you can actually talk into yourself. And so he spoke to the red, and it told him that it was doing the job. So this is from his unconscious. It was doing the job of protecting him against an overpowering, smothering mother. And then within that, there was the green. And then within that was yellow. And within that was, because part of the work is to look through these layers of holding. It's extraordinary that we can actually find and draw these things that are held in our bodies. And he looked through the layers and he found pure white light, the essence of being, if you like. And it told him how terrible it had been feeling for years and years and years. And then he helped it come through the layers, dissolving the layers back into the white light, because that light, our energy, our essence, protects itself by layering itself with deeper and deeper concentrations, even black. Eileen has a picture of her talking to Stephen Hawking, talking to him about black holes in the internal universe. It was an interesting conversation. So what happened was he pulled the light through, and then with amazement, we all watched as within 18 to 20 minutes, his eczema disappeared. His skin became moist. And it just showed how we can hold pain and hurt and everything at a very deep level. So any kind of making lists, working through, when you come to being with a family member, it brings up the old patterns and you realize that you're locked in. There are ways to cut ties. There are actual exercises you can do to cut ties with people. We actually prefer not to do that. We prefer to go back to the origins. When did this happen? And heal it at source, because people find they actually have those family members inside them, made out of their energy, in their unconscious, continuing to cause the problems from the past. And when you heal the them made out of your energy, and you heal the you of the child that you were at the time, it all becomes light, and you feel tingling, and you feel expansion of energy, and you feel fuller and fuller and fuller. So we go in and help people go in very quickly to find these inner spaces which are holding the patterns that can be triggered by something on the outside.
Yes. I don't know if you remember this particular story from my presentation, and I felt very courageous in telling it because it was very personal to me. And I think this speaks to getting yourself in a state where you can allow sort of freedom to come in a little bit more, because I know I was in that state where you're not quite asleep, but you're not quite awake. I don't know what that's called exactly, but that almost a sleep state.
Yes.
Your mind is awake, but your body is very sedentary. And I remember having this vision of my current adult self walking down a path. And I remember seeing it, and this was real, seeing a small child ahead of me in the path, and she was alone and destitute, like her shoulders were hunched and her head was down. And I remember feeling a sense of panic, like who would leave this small child alone? Where's the parents? Where's the person that's supposed to be taking care of it? And I rushed up to her, and I remember reaching out, and she looked up, and we were putting our arms around each other. And the second our eyes met, I had a realization that it was me, it was me as a very small child. And I had this, like, all of these things became clear to me. I saw a rope around my ankle that was attached to my father. And I realized that I was holding expectations of him that he was unable to deliver, and that I was actually causing him pain because of my expectations that I held of him. So if we sit here today and hold, why can't my parent be a better parent? Why can't my mom be a better mom? Why can't my dad be a better dad?
Yes.
And, we all hold some of those type expectations for somebody in our lives. And the most important component of that sort of vision I had is I realized I had been waiting for myself to show up. And that it had taken me. I actually remember apologizing and saying, crap, I am sorry it took me so long to get here. Like, you have been waiting on the side of the road for me to show up for you for a long time, and I have ownership of that. Nobody else is responsible for you but me, and I'm here. I'm here now, and we'll figure this out. And it's been I get a little emotional just thinking about it, because it was so empowering to know that I didn't need to hold anybody else accountable. You know, I'm responsible for me, right?
Yes. We conducted a study last year of our work. Why? Because we had 5,000 plus clients in the UK, but coming here, you know, we had to sort of establish ourselves and what we're doing, which is a bit different to some people. And some 50 or so people came through the study, and one of them was a lady who was in her 70s, and she'd had depression for 34 years.
Wow.
And she only had 6 or 7 sessions, and in the middle one, she discovered a series of younger selves. And, you know, one of the questions was, well, where's a safe place that you'd like to go be? And it was a dogwood tree in her garden. And so she took her 3, her 7, I think 6 was there, 13. I have this strange memory of the younger selves that people discover. And she took them all there, and she then sent me a poem, because she's a writer, published author, and she wrote about Under the Dogwood Tree and how
Oh, wow.
and she cleared her depression, which was from a very young age.
Yeah. And a lot of it is, when I used to meet with the family member who was still holding on to things that were so far in the past,
yes.
I remember thinking to myself that when we're a child, we don't have control. You know, whatever it is, birth to 18,
yes.
we are pretty much at the hands of whatever the caretakers we have responsible for us.
Yes.
And then, you know, something magical happens in that we become adults, and now we're really responsible for ourselves moving forward. And I remember always thinking, you know, my parents were responsible for us for 18 years, but I've been responsible for me for 30 years. So really, who's more to blame? You know, and there's this sense of ownership, I think, that has to happen.
Yeah.
So that we don't continue to get the payoffs by allowing ourselves to stay the victim of circumstances we didn't have control over.
Yes. What I would add, which is something that people find, is that actually, if you were apportioning blame, it would be that as a very little person, all that you could do to cope with a situation was either to go deeply inside yourself or actually escape. And I'll talk about that in a second, my near-death experience. And occasionally the younger selves say, how come you didn't come and find me till now? Da, 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 da. And we point out, well, you did the disappearing act. So it's actually a joint discovery. It's you being, you know, and you really need to thank the adult for coming to find you. And then peace is made, and then the energy can be released. Just to mention the out-of-body thing, at 18 months, I apparently swallowed a bobby pin.
Oh.
And I died, and my mother was busily trying to get the pin out of my throat. I was being driven in the car when I was 50 years old, and I noticed out in front of myself was a streaming, blurry road, and in the middle of it was a clear patch. And Eileen, being Eileen, started a session on me as she was driving in the middle of France. And as I made contact with that place outside of my body, I had an experience of rushing out of my throat.
Wow.
You know, this is going to sound really weird, but it's actually, it's an extreme situation of protecting oneself. And I basically saw the scene. I was able to recover the energy, heal the child, heal the mother, bring it back. I had a great coughing fit. And having had a very poor singing voice, my throat relaxed to a point where I have a very good singing voice.
Oh.
I rang my mother. I rang my mother and I said, Mom, did something happen to me when I was 18 months old? Oh, yeah, yes. And I said, well, what happened? She said, well, you swallowed a bobby pin. And I said, okay. Yeah, she said, I forgot to take it out of your hair, which was falling over your eyes when I put you down to sleep. And so I corroborated that this was true. And it explained to me how kids who are very dreamy at school, those that have imaginary friends, and they have a situation of finding, and I think a lot of the ADHD, ADD symptoms are when kids actually, part of them goes outside themselves. And if you see the pictures behind me, one of the pictures has a yellow blob beside the figure in the top right side. So anyway, yes, there's stuff to do, and recovering all your energy from young selves and healing parents often. You know, there's a lot of healing to go on with parents. We're clearly at the self-actualization stage. We're at the stage of helping people find all of themselves. So we have a lot of very strong, very business-minded, very self-aware people also come to us, as well as the people who really need help. This is your big boulder, if you like. But we also work with people who want to be all they can be. So it's not just about letting go of the things that plague them or that come up and are triggered, but actually want to be the best they can be. So, and they've done every conceivable kind of personal development work, and we just help them with that final piece, as it were, to find the final piece. Because if you're managing yourself, some of you is watching you.
Right. I always feel that. I always feel like there, and it's kind of a humorous part of me saying, "Oh, look at you doing life."
Yeah.
I just talk to my higher self. My higher self is up there, and I've said, "Look, I'm just trying to get to your level in this lifetime. Can I do that?"
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to read you something. It is our job to find, reintegrate or integrate, fully embody and radiate the light, so that we and the light can experience what it means to be fully human. So our higher self is waiting for us to bring it in, roll up its sleeves and get stuck in.
Right.
It's been helping guide us. Now it's time to come on in and radiate out through us. And that's the same with gods, angels, guides, dead folk in our lives. Let's get all the energy, all the past lives, everything else. Let's get all that energy healed and in our vehicle and radiating out.
Well, I think, and I think about this a lot too. Have you read the book Oneness?
Who's that by?
It's channeled, but it's by Rasha. It was written. Anyway, I read it, and every time I read it, and I've read it probably 20 times, it's always relevant to the situation I'm in. It's like the text changes to be really appropriate for the moment. But it's interesting because I have this belief, and I think this makes me be a lighter type person, that every experience that I'm in is something that I have brought to myself. So, and again, it comes back to that not feeling like a victim and not feeling like I'm, let's say I'm in a bad job and I feel trapped and, I have a horrible boss and it's dead end and, I'm just miserable and it's just eating up so much of my life. If you can acknowledge that this is a job you went out, you applied for, you put your resume in, you accepted the position, you choose to stay there, that there's still ownership in all that. So a lot of times I think we place ourselves in the role of being victimized by things outside of ourselves.
Yes.
And if we do take full responsibility for literally almost every situation that we find ourselves in, that is also freeing. Because even when I moved through my divorce, my most freeing moment was not blaming him. Like, why does he have to be that way? How come he can't change? How come, all of this negativity towards what a horrible person he was. And all of a sudden I had a moment of insight. It said, you know what? You went into that marriage with knowledge. You chose to stay. Like, it was your choice to stay. Your job is not to change who he is as a human being. And it was so free. Nothing about him changed. He is who he is, whatever. It was all in me. All the work was in me. And I don't really hold on to anything about that at all anymore. And I think there's so much power in ownership and seeing the truth in things.
Yes. I'm on a WhatsApp link with 3 of my ex-wives and my children and our children and others.
Yes.
And several of my kids are involved in personal development,
Nice.
and yoga and various things. Why I wanted to say that was life's too short. And if we can find out, and the thing that my kids hated most about me bringing them up was whenever they said, I've had a road accident or this happened or that, and I said, what was your part in it? And they said, oh, no.
It was all their fault.
It was all their fault. And every one of them has said afterwards, that was the best teaching you could give.
Yes.
But I want to say one thing about, there are ways that you can do this to rationalize everything and what's happened to you and all the rest of it. But there's also the rubber band effect. The rubber band is if something is planted way back in your past, is that you found ways to manage yourself and stretch away from that. And eventually you run out of steam. You think of the rubber band that stretched so far. And a lot of people they can't go more. I mean, one of the ladies in the study had been meditating. She said, I couldn't meditate one more day. And she found that her 34-year-old self was up a mountain where she left her with all sorts of awareness, but she didn't have that awareness in her body. So the rubber band effect. The other one is cutting ties. So there are some excellent workshops and things which have you cut off from negative feelings, negative thoughts, and step into a future possibility, and you operate from that. So you can control your life. You're not influenced by those things. My experience of those people is very often their relationships are not very deep because they are extremely successful in life, moneyed, but they are skating through life and they haven't dealt with the past. So it's back to your point, really, which is, create fantastic futures which pull you forward. Work and manage yourself in the present, but do think about what's left in your past that you need to recover. I'm very available on telephone and text if anybody wants to talk after this and talk about that.
How do they get in touch with you? So your website is ravenscroft.com.
Yes.
Right.
A cell phone number is 561. No, I'm not supposed to hand these things out.
Up to you, Clive.
561-351-9134. And an email for me is cdigby, D-I-G-B-Y -Jones, Digby-Jones @ravenscroft.com. Any of those three things, get in touch. And, you can send for articles. We have a book. It's $10 plus shipping. Is about $15.
The Missing Piece, which is available on Amazon. I will post a link when this video posts. I'll post a link in the comments. Yes. So people will have your website, your contact information, and then also how to purchase the book.
It's also on Google, and it's on whatever the other one is. Yes, I can't.
Yeah.
It's on. You can get it, so you can read it on an iPad, and then we do sessions by Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, and obviously face-to-face after the virus. We're going to be doing training in the US, bringing our training over from the UK, and we're launching Power for Good this year. And that will be linking arms with lots of people who are already powers for good in the world, and techniques for becoming a power for good, including ours, but it's also all of the other wonderful things. When I did inner work to find my soul's purpose, I discovered I was to be a tour guide to the ancient mysteries.
Nice.
To run creative nurseries. So I was 15 years.
For all of our inner children?
Well, absolutely. But I was also a consultant in innovation, and one of the things was I helped take down the Berlin Wall, and that's a story for another time.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Clive. I've been looking forward to our conversation. I knew we would have a lot of good stuff to talk about, so thank you so much for joining us today. And again, like I mentioned in the introduction, relinquishing the past, letting go of those things that still harbor anger and hold you down are definitely worth the work. So reach out to Clive, his wife Eileen, as they have very specific programs to help you with this work. So take care.
Can I add a postscript? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Dr. Eileen is the wonderful developer of the work RAPSI, Ravenscroft Approach to Psycho-Spiritual Integration, and RAPSI, Radiance Therapy. So she is a person to hear from as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And guys, we will see you in the next episode. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.